Harriet and William Lilly lived at number 7 Bucks Row, which according to newspaper reports was located 2 doors along from where the body of Mary Nichols was discovered on the morning of August the 31st, 1888. Harriet was around 47 years old, and the couple's bedroom faced onto Bucks Row, meaning that she could, so she claimed, hear everything that occurred in the street outside. As far as can be ascertained, Harriet came forward on the afternoon of Thursday the 6th of September, almost a week after the murder, and had spoken not to the police but to a journalist. What she said, however, if it was true, was of huge importance, as it established the time at which the attack on Mary Nichols took place, and therefore helped pinpoint the time of her murder. Unfortunately, Harriet wasn't called to give evidence at the inquest into the death of Mary Nichols, so she wasn't subjected to the questioning by the coroner and jury, which may have helped determine the veracity of what she said she had heard. In consequence, her account only survives in a handful of newspapers, the first being the Echo, which published details of what she claimed to have heard in its edition of Thursday the 6th of September. The article began,
"Some moans heard." An important statement throwing considerable light on a point hitherto surrounded with some uncertainty. The time the crime was committed in Bucks Row, or the body deposited there, was made on Thursday by Mrs. Harriet Lilley, who lives 2 doors from the spot where the deceased was discovered. Mrs. Lilley said,
"I slept in the front of the house and could hear everything that occurred in the street. On that Thursday night I was somehow very restless. Well, I heard something I mentioned to my husband in the morning. It was a painful moan, 2 or 3 faint gasps, and then it passed away. It was quite dark, but a luggage train went by as I heard the sounds. There was, too, a sound as of whispers underneath the window. I distinctly heard voices, but cannot say what was said. It was too faint. I then woke my husband and said to him, 'I don't know what possesses me, but I cannot sleep tonight.'"
Mrs. Lilley added that as soon as she heard of the murder, she came to the conclusion that the voices she heard were in some way connected with it. The cries were very different from those of an ordinary street brawl. It has been ascertained that on the morning of the date of the murder, a goods train passed on the East London Railway at about 3:30, the 3:07 out of New Cross, which was probably the time when Mary Ann Nichols was either killed or placed in Bucks Row.
And that is all we really have concerning Harriet Lilley. As mentioned earlier, for some reason she wasn't called to give evidence at the inquest into Mary Nichols's death. Why this should have been is now impossible to know. The police and the coroner may have thought that her statement wouldn't have added anything that wasn't already known to the proceedings, which is unlikely because establishing the time of death would have been paramount to the proceedings. Indeed, on Saturday the 22nd of September, the coroner, Win Edwin Baxter, in his summing up at the inquest into Mary Nichols's death, made specific mention that the time at which the body was found cannot have been far from 3:45 a.m. as it is fixed by so many independent data. So Harriet Lilley's statement would most certainly have helped ascertain how long before the body was found the murder had actually taken place. Yet, other than the brief mention of her in several newspapers, Harriet is conspicuous by her absence from the official proceedings and the police records. The police cannot have been unaware of her claims, and since we know that they vetted witnesses who they thought should be called to give evidence at inquests, we can only surmise that for some reason they doubted the accuracy of what Harriet Lilley had to say. Likewise, Coroner Baxter, who would have made the final decision about who he wished to hear evidence from, also chose not to call her, suggesting that he too set no store by it. There is also the issue of it having taken her almost a week to come forward. She lived 2 doors from the murder site in Bucks Row and had, according to her statement, mentioned what she had heard to her husband the next morning. Throughout the day of Friday the 31st of August, Bucks Row was a hive of activity, with police making inquiries and even going door to door to ask residents if they had seen or heard anything. Yet Harriet Lilley appears not to have come forward at this stage. There were also journalists at the scene, gathering as much information as they could. One of them even interviewed Robert Paul, the second man at the scene of the murder after Charles Cross, as he made his way home along Bucks Row that afternoon. Yet Harriet Lilley didn't speak to any journalist until the afternoon of Thursday the 6th of September. There is therefore a strong possibility that Harriet Lily didn't hear what she said she had heard on the morning of the murder. She may have been one of the many time wasters who crop up again and again in the newspapers claiming to have seen or heard things in the hope of either a little financial remuneration or simply to enjoy a brief period in the spotlight. The fact is, we'll never know whether Harriet Lily was telling the truth or whether she was either mistaken about the date on which she heard the moans or simply invented a story which she managed to hoodwink a journalist with. It is interesting to note that aside from a small selection, very few newspapers gave her any coverage, suggesting that they too didn't believe her story. She must remain one of the many enigmas that help make this case so baffling and fascinating, and she is just one of a long line of people who turned up, added another twist to the mystery, and having done so, faded into the obscurity from which she had emerged, never to be heard from again. What do you think of what Harriet Lily claimed to have heard? Let me know in the comments down below.